Hello, 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 hello.
Yeah. Woo. Ooh. Third degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. The Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast.
Third Degree, the podcast, is brought to you by Soccer90.com. Shop their extensive collection of FC Dallas North Texas Soccer Club and U.S. national team gear. All your soccer merchandise, they got everything, including the new FC Dallas One Planet Parlay jersey, one of the best ones of those they've had in years, to be honest. If you use the code Third Degree at checkout, you get 20% off your order. That's Soccer90.com. The code Third Degree, 20% off. Some exclusions apply.
Well, hello there, FC Dallas Curious fan. Welcome to episode numbered 209 of Third Degree, the podcast. Hi, 'tis me, Pitois. And Dan Crooke is still back home. Will he ever return from Luton as they march on towards promotion? I think it's possible he may not. We may never see Dan again. Oh, of course we will. So it's just me and everybody else's hero, Buzz Carrick. Come in, Buzz. Howdy, Buzz.
Hi, Peter. Since we're recording on Wednesday night and this won't air till tomorrow, happy Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you.
Yes. Happy Star Wars Day. You know, I am being a good Star Wars nerd, and I am watching for the first time. I'm catching up on Rebels.
Oh, just now watching that one?
Yes.
Yeah.
I went through Clone Wars and got through that.
Yeah.
And now recently started doing Rebels. I've been following one particular super nerd's recommendation on an edited list instead of watching all of the episodes, just watching the necessary ones.
Okay.
It turns out by the time you get to season 3, it's essentially all of them anyway.
Yeah.
So I've been doing that, and I got to say, Star Wars is a lot more fun when you watch all the content versus just the stupid movies.
Yeah, what I would say about both Clone Wars and Rebels is that Clone Wars, but the last season of which is phenomenal, Clone Wars really makes the Star Wars prequels much more digestible.
It does.
Because it fills in all the Anakin. I mean, he is, in the Clone Wars, he is outright hateable by the time you get to the end of the Clone Wars show, I think.
Yes.
And then Rebels is also are really good because I really dislike that Edger Bridget character. I couldn't stand that little prat either at the beginning of that show. He gets better, but not to get all nerdy, but Ahsoka Tano is one of my all-time favorite characters, and so I can't wait for that show.
Yeah, that looks good too. So, okay, we should probably stop
That's
talking
enough
Star
nerd.
Wars.
This is not a Star Wars pod.
No, it's the burn pod is what it is, Buzz. All right, so we will get into Minnesota 0, Dallas 0 in just a few minutes, but because that was such a massive turd of a soccer match, I thought we would start with the more exciting and interesting stuff, which was all of this noise that's been happening late about Alan Velasco and the fact that he now has even, I guess, commented on this and the idea that he's been linked with some sales back down to Argentina and Boca, and then the one that's even the most ridiculous idea, Brighton. And I'm fascinated to know where you land on this, Buzz, because I have a pretty hot sports opinion about this.
Well, thankfully, Alan finally talked to somebody who speaks Spanish, and I think it's an Argentina podcast, but he said Boca hasn't contacted him. That's good. He did say that he eventually wants to go to Europe. Well, of course he does. They all do. They all want to play at the highest level. That's perfectly fine. He mentioned that he didn't think that Dallas had paid for his transfer fee yet, which I would assume would be the case. Most transfer fees are not paid in lump sums; they're paid over time. Mm-hmm. Most things may not know that. When you sell somebody for $20 million, you don't get a check for $20 million. It comes in over installments. I'm sure that at some point Alan Velasco will go to Europe. I don't know that England is ideal. I certainly don't think Brighton is ideal. Whether he could get a work permit or not is a massive, massive question because he does not play for Argentina. I mean, we're talking about Argentina, right? Getting into that national team is not easy. So, and you'll probably know a lot more about that than I do. I certainly would not think Brighton was the right club for him, and even if he went to England. But I can't see him going to England. That makes no sense to me at all. He's not that kind of player. He's a different kind of player.
Well, I think Look, it's okay for Dallas fans to really like Alan Velasco, but I also feel in the same breath, and maybe this is my hot sports opinion, there's no way Velasco is Premier League ready. He's not even the best player on the team here in Dallas, and he's not an all-star top 11 player in the league, and I'm not even sure he's one of the top 5 wingers in the league at this point.
Yeah, he has a lot of growing to do still. We've seen the last few games that certainly it's impactful when he's missing for FC Dallas, but that doesn't mean he's ready to go for a fee that will recoup what Dallas paid to get him. It's not, that's part of the equation too, is that he has to progress enough that Dallas will be making not just something, because they're not looking to get rid of the guy. This isn't a situation where they've had once time in the past where you're happy to get rid of him. This is a guy who's really good for you, even if he's not an elite player yet. You still want the price to be enough that you're like, okay, that's a profit of, I don't know, 4 million, 5 million. I'm ready to do it now. So it's not as simple as somebody called, he's under contract, so he's not going anywhere.
Well, I'll even go so far, Buzz, to say I'm not even sure we're at the point in his time in Dallas that we can even all agree that they've gotten their money out of him.
Oh, no way. Yeah.
Right.
No, yeah.
I mean, they spent a lot of money on this kid, and I'm not saying he's been a disappointment, but he certainly hasn't. It's not like he came in and took the league over.
No, and they've got him through 2025 under contract and an option for 26. So it's not like at the end of the season he's leaving, so you better get what you can. Yeah. This is a guy who's going to be the core part of your team for 3 or 4 years until somebody shows up with a check that you can't turn down. But he's not at that point. He's not even close to the point where someone's going to show up with a check you can't turn down for him. He's too inconsistent and too undisciplined and not impactful enough in terms of pure game winning. Is he really, really good? Absolutely. But we're not talking about good. We're talking about here's $15 million. That's totally different discussion.
Sure, and the only way you would want to sell him now for even anything close to what you paid for him is if you thought he was potentially a bust, and I don't think anybody thinks he's a bust, especially in the long term. So this is, this was an investment. It was always an investment, and people should think of it that way. But when you see things in the social meds like the Boca and the Brighton stuff, you can dismiss it out of hand because he's just not there yet. Unless somebody wants to pay you $15 million now, then you're like, okay, go.
Yeah. If somebody crazy falls in love with him and drops a crazy check because they're crazy and they can and they have buku money,
Pepe.
Pepe. Or, if Newcastle decides they want him for some reason, somebody like Man City, somebody that has this crazy money that can afford a guy and can afford to overpay for a guy. But that's not likely, and it's certainly not Brighton. I don't think, so I'm sure, look, it's the silly season, coming up, and it's starting a little early, which just tells you that you have some guys that are doing some good things, that it's starting before you even get to that next window, which is like July. So, we got 2.5 months before it even opens.
Okay, so where do you think this originates from? Because I think a lot of people's reaction was, whatever. This is clearly Velasco's people putting this out there, and so let's just run with that. Let's just, for the sake of argument, say, okay, that's true. Why would they do that?
Well, the first indications I saw of it was a radio show in Argentina that covers
stupid radio shows,
covers Boca, and they were talking about players they thought could help Boca, and the people on the radio show, like you and I, said, "Oh, Alan Velasco would be great," and so that's where the Boca stuff started, and then the Brighton stuff, I have no idea. I do know that agents will sometimes drop a name that they've had contact from that they have zero chance they're ever going to do anything with, just because it can make you. It's like when it's just exactly the same as when Bogart the other day dropped that thing about LA Galaxy calling about Paul Arriola, because there's zero chance that was actually real. FC Dallas probably laughed and hung the phone up. So it means nothing. Then it's really easy for him to drop that. So I'm sure the Brighton thing is the same way. His agent probably was like, oh, hey, Brighton likes him, because they're never in the way in hell they're going to Brighton. Can't get a work permit even if he wanted to go to Brighton.
Yeah.
So a lot of times it's like that.
Let me give the FC Dallas Curious fan a pro tip. Never, ever, 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 ever listen to radio soccer hosts. They're just full of hot air idiots.
Yeah,
right.
You're killing us, dude.
You're not a radio. I'm anyway.
Well, as we always say, only 1 out of 10 of these kinds of links is real, and even less of them actually happen. But it's fun to talk about, and it gets us all riled up, and it gives us a talking point. So that's fine.
Podcast hosts and you should totally listen to and buy everything they say 100%. Radio guys, no, not so much.
People that actually get paid don't listen to them.
Right, don't ever do that. And then the other thing that popped up, and this is the one that maybe there's something to it, but it also worries me greatly, is the idea that Watford wanted to throw their moose horns into Mr. Jesus Ferreira.
Yeah, Watford and Jesus can probably get a lot closer to getting a work permit. Now, you'll know better than me the minutia, and Dan will probably don't tell us.
I would be shocked if he couldn't get a work permit.
Right. I mean, it's based on a percentage of national team appearances and also like first team. So I think Jesus easily gets a work permit if he wants it. I don't know that Watford's the right fit for him either, but it does underline the fact that people are aware of Jesus Ferreira. He was in the World Cup, and anyone in the World Cup is going to be aware on these teams' radars. Watford probably thinks he's more affordable than a lot of other options. Again, sometimes agents drop the names of the teams that are not in the mix that actually contacted at some point because it gets their guy getting talked about.
Ferreira in the championship intrigues me, not because I think it would be a really incredibly difficult challenge in not a dissimilar way that it has been for Josh Sargent. Different positions, but I also think the physicality of that league is something that's been a challenge for both those guys, kind of the manicness of it. I think if I was to see Jesus go somewhere else, I think I'd like to see him end up in another country playing somewhere else, doing his thing.
If I got a vote, I would say like second tier Spain, well, like I don't even know who that is anymore. Like a Rayo Vallecano or a Valencia, not Barcelona, Madrid. Maybe Atletico even would be the top of that second tier, perhaps. But again, he has same deal through 2025 with the 26 option. So you're not getting him out of FC Dallas unless you come with a check that's just ridiculous. And that I don't know if that's happening. Maybe it is. Yeah. And if he wants out, maybe he's forcing the hand, like some guys do. But that one's more realistic than I think the Velasco one, which is just silly. But I still don't think we're looking at that happening this summer by any stretch. I mean, it would probably have to be next winter at the earliest, and even that I don't really see happening.
Would love if I could like a landing place for him. One of the better Dutch teams in the Dutch league, I think would be interesting for him, or Portugal. Or one of the mid-table Bundesliga teams, I think would be great for Jesus, but who knows? I guess.
Yeah, I mean, if he comes out of the back end of this season, leading the league or in the conversation for the Golden Boot again, it's for 2 straight seasons, then you'll start to see maybe somebody coming in with the kind of checks we're talking about that would be able to get him. But that's about it, really.
All right, well, it was inevitable. We had to get to this point of the pod, which is the dirge of the last game for Dallas, which is, I think, it was probably highly predictable this would end up being in a low-scoring, if not no-scoring, tie affair based on how both teams play, Buzz. But that doesn't make it any less not entertaining than it turned out to be.
Yeah, neither one of these teams really wants the ball a whole lot. They both, Minnesota wants to sit and counter, and they ended up getting almost close to 50% of the possession just because Dallas doesn't really want it either. Dallas wants to transition quickly, not necessarily bunker and counter, but they would transition quickly, which is different. We've explained that a couple of times. So not two teams that are really functioning at a high rate. Minnesota can't score at home, can't win a game at home. Dallas plays to kill the game on the road. That game, however, had some intensity. I think because Minnesota hasn't won at home and are so desperate to get a result there, they came out really intense. It almost had like a playoff vibe for the first 15 minutes, not in terms of quality, just in terms of like people really going at each other and going at the game and not allowing any space or time. Dallas is still playing into form this season. They're not back to where they were at the end of last year by any means. So kind of a clunker of a game. Dallas really only had chances late. And ended up with 7 shots, which is not very much. And I think they only had 2 through about 70 minutes. It wasn't until they changed formations that they got a little joy. Minnesota had a lot more shots, 17 at home. That's kind of reasonable, but They only managed 5 on goal, and I just never felt like they were with really danger. I mean, they ended up with an XG over 1, but it didn't really feel like they were all that dangerous most of the time. So it kind of was a dull game in a lot of ways.
Yeah, only a couple of, I guess there was the header. Lode had that really nice dribbly run that if he had finished that would have probably been goal of the week.
Yeah, it was a good one. Yeah.
I thought I saw that he got the highest rating in the game of any of the players.
He did. I mean, Martin Potts was really good. Had a couple of really good saves, but like that Lod run was just about the one that scared me, honestly.
Yeah, and so I guess, Buzz, the question is, based on this run that's been happening of late with the club, and I think fair to say the two of us, and Dan, when he's been around, the three of us over the course of the last month, we've all been a little bit like, we're like our temperature on the team is rather warm at this point. And this game didn't do anything to change that, I don't think.
No, it did not. Admittedly, like the last few games, the combinations of Velasco missing, the combined with Jesus was out a little bit, Nikose hurt, there was a game Martinez was hurt about 3 games ago. So, it's just little things, little inconsistencies. The offense isn't going gangbusters, but the defense is just slightly worse than last year, but again, a lot of that, I don't know what's going on. Like the whole league is actually a little off its game. I was reading a thing today. Doyle was talking about how goal scoring is down like across the whole league, this year. And I don't know whether it was the long off season because of the World Cup being in the winter or what's the deal is. I talked to Coach today. And
COVID.
He said,
it's COVID.
It could be, yeah, it's a little late for COVID. I talked to Coach today, and he agreed. He even was making the point that we're really not up to where we were last year. We're just now starting to play the way I want to play. Just now starting to get it in a little bit, not even the whole game, mind you, just little chunks of it. Like he was talking about how the first 15 of that game against Minnesota, it was really rough, but then they kind of found themselves and got it going a little bit in the second half of the first half, and then early in the second half. So they got playing the way they want to play, but then even then it didn't result in real opportunities. It's just not clicking on all cylinders. And I think this team is not good enough that when you take a piece out, it all works. Like Velasco's an example. He attracts so much attention from the defense. Like when he's just running around, they're keeping an eye on him. When he's not in there, you don't have to keep an eye on the people that are replacing him. Obrian, like you can just.
Well, I also think that's 2 parts to that story. One is the absence of Velasco, and it's the addition of Obrian.
Well, this was actually for Obrian one of his better games. He was only offside 1 time. I know it seemed like it was like 8 times, but if you did a stat, I went and looked. If you do a stat comparison with him and Paxton, he actually was better than Paxton in almost every phase of the game, statistically speaking. So I'm not saying that you're not right, that generally speaking, Obrian is nowhere near the player Velasco is, but of his games, this one wasn't particularly horrible. This one was just meh. The whole team was bad, not just Obrian.
Well, all right. Well, fair enough. It's still Obrian. Yeah. If you had to choose, you're always going to take Allen over Obrian, right?
Yeah, 10 out of 10, of course. Okay. I'm not saying that. I'm not. There is a point at which you have to expect the guys on the bench to not be as good. The only problem with Obrian is that there's the lack of cohesion in the team concept, and that he probably is a little bit higher paid than you might like for a backup. But it's not like he's Franco Jara $3 million backup. It's somewhat reasonable that he is who he is, given that he's not a starter here anymore. That doesn't mean you're not going to get rid of him. I'm just saying that, that's not.
Tafari obviously didn't play in the game. He's been injured, and we'll talk more about that, what you learned about him today. I just, we've been very concerned and focused on the center back situation with Ivy and Mr. Martinez back there. Any thoughts on that from this particular game?
Yeah, particularly I was fascinated that Taylor Twellman, and I assume he actually got this from the other team's coach, that Minnesota came into the game with a press trigger on Ibeagha. So basically when the ball went into his feet for possession, that was one of their triggers. So that's indicative of the fact, generally speaking, Dallas cannot play out of the back very well. Paz is, as we noticed on Twitter, he's better than the average MLS keeper, but that's not saying much because his weakness compared to why he's in MLS and not Europe is his feet. And neither Martinez nor Ibi are great on the ball. Martinez is a decent enough passer, and maybe he's an okay passer, but that's not the same as having the ball at your feet and making a decision about, do I touch and dribble, and do I go into space, or do I shit? Those are different things. And so playing out of the back for this team is a little bit of a problem. And a lot of teams like to press now, including Minnesota. A lot of teams like to do to Dallas is a double thing. They press high, and then they drop and block. They give you the middle part of the field, and they make it hard for you up high, make it hard for you down low. So that press trigger, anytime Dallas is going to get him out of the back, even when they have Nkosi, he's not as good a passer as Hedges was. So it's just not something Dallas is really great at these days.
Tuamase back in the lineup.
I thought he was pretty good. I
mean,
remember that he comes back. He's back in right now these days, because of defensive play, because of solidity, because Giovanni Jesus is not dialed in on the team tactics and occasionally makes the wrong decisions defensively. And this coach is a big believer in that. So that's why he was in, and he did a solid performance, I thought, defensively, because that's why he got back in.
I felt bad for Emma because in the highlight package the league put out, the one highlight they put in of his was him losing the ball and getting the ball taken away for a fairly decent opportunity for Minnesota. I don't think it was indicative of,
He wasn't flawless by any means, no.
No. And so Junkwa got the start, not Farfan. Is that just a resting thing, Buzz?
I think so. To me, Farfan last game looked really tired, and they really last season burned him out. And so it's really important that Junka plays a fair amount. And I was actually really pleased that it wasn't noticeable that he was in there, right? That it was relatively the same. Obviously I think Farfan's a better player, but if you can get a guy in and have it be relatively undisturbed, which it was a clean sheet, remember. So,
yeah,
solid game from him.
Was this their first clean sheet on the road dating back to last season? Is that the record, or is that the stat?
No, didn't they have a clean sheet at Inter Miami like 3 weeks ago?
Oh,
they
right.
They
that was the first one. Yeah. Okay.
But that's only the second one of the year. I mean, you would before that they'd gone 12 or whatever it was. So that was I think that Inter game was in Miami.
I think you're right. Yeah. All right. And then the other thing, Buzz, Mr. Cerrillo made his return to the starting position. And I'm sure you were delighted about that. Any thoughts on his performance?
Well, he was super nervous for like the first 10 or 15. I think some of that was just the pressure that Minnesota became hot in the early going. Also, I've talked about Edwin before. He's a guy that needs a little love from the coach, and he was probably feeling unloved over not having started for 2 or 3 games or whatever it was. Once he settled down, I thought he was actually quite good. Not great. Remember, everything's in context. He's not going to be an all-star. But I thought he was pretty solid. And then when they shifted formations, they brought Facundo in. But that was just about, I talked to the coach about that particular sub, and that was just, a fresh legs, minute management. Edwin hadn't started in a few weeks. That was all. It wasn't necessarily like Edwin was a bad kind of sub. There's a difference between a guy who's playing poorly and you yank him versus just a management sub, which that one was.
So let's take a minute and talk about Paxton, who has been starting regularly for the team. And I have a feeling we're into another Paxton Pomacall season where if you were just doing the standard highlight package eyeball scan test, you'd go, oh, he, whatever. But I have a feeling that if you dig into the numbers like you did last year, you'd find out he's like killing it in all the stats.
He's having a pretty good year. That we're waiting for the next phase of his progression, which is the thing Doyle pointed out, which is the thing that would make him elite would be that last pass into the box that needs to be a scoring opportunity or an assist or a key pass. There's just this final. It's honestly always been a problem his whole career. And it's the thing we've been waiting forever for it to go. Overall, yes, he's having a really good season. This game was a little flat for him. It wasn't as good as his games have been this year. Like I mentioned that O'Brien was better than him in almost every stat. But again, you also went to late on, you went to a flat 4, so he was a little more isolated in that situation. He's who he is.
Is the example of the final pass into the box is a good example of that, the pass that he attempted, I think, to O'Brien that was behind O'Brien.
Yeah. There's just, I don't know whether it's because he's now aware of it, but for some reason when he gets that last touch in the box, when you want to lay it off, he's just I don't know, slightly off or takes one touch too many or hesitates for a split second.
Yeah.
And you just end up with, and it doesn't make him a bad player. It's what makes him not be an elite player. It's the reason he's still here, right? Mm-hmm. If he played the way he plays and added 10 assists a year, you're not asking him to be like a playmaker and hit like 20 or anything like that.
That's why he's not getting linked to Brighton.
Right. Yeah. There's no one looking to buy Paxton because he doesn't have 8, 9, 10 assists a year.
Right.
Out of a linking 8, that's what you would want. He's not De Bruyne. You're not going to get 20. He's a linking 8. You're going to get, but you'd like to get 8, 9, 10 instead of like 2, 3, 4. So that's all.
And how about the continued season of the Team Bachelor?
You mean Leggett?
Well, yeah, duh.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't keep up with these shows. It's the same to me. I just get this over. He probably wouldn't say this is true, but I watch him play, and it feels like he's just playing in the game. He's just there. I don't see like a fire. I don't know that it's necessarily. I don't blame him if it's all the personal stuff. I can't help but think that like not making the World Cup, not that he was super close, but that was his last shot at like the national team. Really, He didn't get that. Now he has the off the field problem. He was supposed to be in the best shape of his career, and then he got hurt like 3 times in the spring and missed all the games. As you get older, and he is 30 now, you don't recover as quickly. It's harder. You get knocked, and it takes longer to recover. I don't know. He's just really flat to me, and I can't. But so is Areola. So I don't know that I can really put my finger on what's going on with either one of them, other than like those two guys being out of sorts is a big contributor to why Dallas as a collective is out of sorts.
So here we sit after 0-0, and Dallas still remains 4th in the Western Conference. It's weird because we feel like, I think our vibe is that the season hasn't been all that great, but they're still in a really good position for the season. And this leads into a tweet that you got earlier today, Buzz, sent to you from @ColossalPatty that asked us to do the following. Any way you guys can do a discussion on the state of MLS and teams in and around Dallas and the standings. I think it's worth discussing. Many Dallas fans feel the team hasn't hit the stride yet and took a step back, but other fans in the league have Dallas at 7 through 12 in their rankings. And then she followed that up with, maybe the better question is, what about Dallas has them propped higher in the eyes of other fan bases?
Well, the answer to that question is basically their ability to get results. You have to remember that Dallas is coming out of last season having finished relatively high in the West. And the way this team plays on the road, like last year, I think they had their second lowest number of road losses all time, which shows that they go on the road and they get points, whether it be ties or even occasionally wins, right?
Right.
And then at home, Frisco at home, at the end of last year, they hadn't lost a game at home in like 19 or 20, and even though you were not getting the shutouts at the beginning of this year, you're rarely getting blown out of the water. So you're almost always in every game. You can defensively stifle almost every team you play. You got 1 or 2 guys that can be, when they're on, can be difference makers up front. That allows you to grind out points. And that's why Dallas is what I use affectionately call the best of the rest, right? When we look at the Western Conference, for example, those top 3 have separated themselves, particularly in goal differential. Then there's this pack of teams that are on a 0, 1, 2, 3 goal differential. Well, Dallas, of those teams, is able to turn those things into results. So it's the combination of relative defensive stability and relatively good finishing efficiency allows you to get points. It makes you better than the teams behind you. It's not sexy. And we know that the defense this year is not quite as bad as last year. And we know the offense is not quite as good as last year, but it's still quite early. And that same is true of everybody in the league. So
it's worse. The defense is a little worse than last year.
Oh, did I say?
You said not as bad as last year.
No, I'm sorry. It's not as good as last year. It's slightly worse than last year. Both things are worse than last year. That's what I mean to say.
Yeah. And the other thing I would say is, don't forget, Dallas finished 3rd in the West last year.
Yeah.
So for us to say they don't feel like they're as good as last year doesn't mean we think they're not a playoff team, like 10th or lower. I think other people having them somewhere between 7th and I think anything lower than ninth is probably not very realistic. It just doesn't feel like they're the fourth best team in the West right now.
Yeah.
But to your point, Buzz, I think you're right. They are kind of the best of, at least they've earned a position of best of the rest. I don't really know how good San Jose or Houston are. I don't think Minnesota's all that great, but they've also been they've been better on the road than they have been at home, right?
Yeah.
So that really becomes a byproduct of just how this entire league is just built on parity, and Dallas is just one of those teams that kind of sits in the middle at this point. So
yeah.
I don't think that we on this particular podcast have them. I hope nobody comes away from us having this conversation about how we don't think they're as good this year translates into them being something like the Galaxy or Sporting Kansas City, or Austin. It's just they're not that bad. They're just not as good as they were last year.
Yeah, they're clicking along at 1.5 points per game, which is perfectly reasonable. That's the middle pack. Again, it's the ability to translate your play into production, which they do really well. And remember that people believe in FC Dallas because they now have done this for 2 straight seasons. This isn't a one-season aberration where they've, like Houston, for example, has a similar kind of points per game number, but they were absolutely horrible last year. So nobody really has any faith in them, what they're doing. Whereas you look at Dallas and you go, oh, they did it last year. Look, they're doing it again this year. Okay, we believe that they're as good as their record says they are. And we've talked about Dallas is still rounding into form, and they're still trying to find that form of last season. Slightly worse on both ends. So is everybody else. Everybody else in the league is slightly worse than they were last year,
right,
except for those very best teams. I mean, you can look at the whole middle pack, all those teams. Like if I don't watch them closely, but I watch them enough to know that the results are indicative of how they're playing. Everybody has these struggles right now, other than LAFC, Seattle. Even St. Louis fell off. New England's doing really well. Cincinnati's doing really well. That's it. Like those 4 teams are good, and everybody else is meh. And the Dallas is of the mess is solid. They have lots of good pieces. Again, this team always has the bonus of the homegrown players that keeps them above all the other average teams that don't have those, that have to rely just on the draft and free agents. Dallas has that leg up. It always means they're going to be in the middle of the playoff picture, right below the elite teams.
And also don't forget, we're ostensibly, just to kind of make a round number, a third of the way through the season. And everybody knows that you can carve Major League Soccer seasons into thirds. And it's always a battle of making sure that 2/3 of your season are good, because almost everybody inevitably has one really crummy third of a season, and you just want to make sure that crummy third isn't your final third. And for Dallas, it's just trying to get through the summer months, and the way the schedule's kind of playing out for them. So
this year too, the May schedule is nuts.
Yeah, the May schedule is nuts. I mean, the St. Louis. We'll talk about St. Louis, but then the Open Cup game midweek again. They have to travel to Nashville, and then they have to travel, and 3 days later go to Austin and figure out, how do they deal with that situation? As mediocre as Austin's been, they're going to be up for that game.
Yeah.
Then Vancouver comes to town 4 days later. Then you turn around, and 3 days after that, and you got to host Houston. So and then San Jose comes to town a week after that, and then you got
Lucha Ball.
So
Kansas City.
Anyway, so it is an interesting month for sure. Just mostly because you got the 2 Texas Derby games mixed in there.
Yeah, and maybe a second Open Cup game if you can get past Nashville on the road. That's a tough draw.
That's true. Yeah, and that would get probably when is that? Is that the one wedged between the 20 and 27th?
It's next week from right now when we're recording.
No, the one after Nashville.
Oh, the one after that.
If they were to beat Nashville, when would that game be? The week of the 20th, I guess?
It'd be the 23rd or 24th, which probably the 24th.
Yeah. All right. So it is absolutely an interesting month lining up for Dallas. So which will take us, Buzz, to this Saturday, which is the big Hall of Fame. Celebration stuff. It's that time of year for that to happen. St. Louis comes to town. St. Louis was really the story of the season for quite a while until the shine has fallen off a little bit of late. They lost their last game, but they come into down here in Dallas. Any surprises, do you think, coming up in the starting lineup?
Well, you have to talk about St. Louis first and who they are. Like Klaus is hurt, right? So I don't know whether he'll be available or not. He was out last game. The injury report for this week has not been updated. So whether he's back or not changes the way they play. When they have him, they put a lot of crosses in the box. He's an old school, big physical 9, like Connor Casey or something like that. Get in the box and knock you over.
A little more refined than Mr. Connor Casey.
I'm using it as style example so people would know that name perhaps. So if he's there, then they're going to want to do a lot of crosses from the wings, and that might tell you're going to want to kind of go with a wide sort of shape that might be like a 4 to try and get some guys out there to deny crosses. If he's not available, well, then they don't play that way. They play more narrow, and then the 4-3-3 makes more sense for Dallas. Either way, St. Louis is a press team, like an aggressive press team, like the whole game press team. They play what is called the Red Bull method. And I don't mean New York Red Bull. I mean all the Red Bulls play this way. Every club they have plays the same system, and they play that same system. So it's a high press team. Like, for example, in training today, Dallas spent pretty much the whole day working on breaking press and line breaking and getting forward at teams aggressively once you break press. So I am actually expecting a fairly intense game because St. Louis is going to come at you hard and try and turn you over. Obviously, that's a tiny bit of an issue because Dallas, as we've talked about, is not super great about playing out of the back. But again, they're working on it, so hopefully they'll be better at it. They managed to get through the last game against the press without giving up a goal. So if they can do that again, that'll be the goal. The idea behind the game is to not let St. Louis turn you over because that's where they get all their goals from. So in terms of play and who's going to play for Dallas, Nicosi is out probably for at least another week.
And what's his injury again?
It's a muscle injury. I don't know that they've said specifically. I think the initial report was lower body muscle injury. So, if it's like a hockey club, they don't want to tell you what it is. So it's probably a coach said it's not severe. It was more precautionary than anything, except that today in training, he was over on the side doing rehab work. So it's not like he's in possibility. Apparently he's out for this weekend. Now that's important. They're hoping to get him back for Wednesday, not to divert for just a second, which is the Open Cup game, because people will have forgotten Martinez is on a red card for the Kansas City game last year in the Open Cup. So Martinez is out for Wednesday's Open Cup game.
Okay.
So you really need Nicosi back for next Wednesday, if possible. Otherwise, Nolan's starting at center back. But not to divert too far from that. So Nicosi's not going to be available. Velasco trained today. They had him on a management thing where they didn't allow him to go the whole game. They made him rotate in and out like every rotation, come sit out on the side. So if he reacts well, which I think he will, because he looked really good, I think he's available. So I don't think you risk a start, but I think you'd want to bring him in if you can off the bench. So the questions are, is Farfan back? Is Giovanni back, or does Tomasi keep a spot? Tomasi played pretty well, but Gio's probably better dribbling forward, maybe in a build out, as long as he doesn't do that stupid pass thing that he so far hasn't done in a game. Obrian probably goes again if Velasco can't go. The big question will be, which formation do you see, the wider 4-4-2 or the narrow 4-3-3? Again, I think it'll depend on whether they think that the dude from St. Louis is playing. So you're kind of everything else will feed off of that. If it's the 4-4-2, then Jimenez is in with Jesus, and then you have Leggett as a possible wide player instead of Obrian. If it's the narrow, then it's Jesus with Paul and Obrian, and Leggett's back in midfield with Paxton and either Edwin or Facundo. There's actually multiple tactics and shapes at play. And this coach really likes to tinker with the shape and the personnel based on the opposition. So I think they're going to make a call on this thing really late in the week based on, what the St. Louis injury report looks like.
Yeah. The other thing is that it appears it is lining up to be another sellout. Again, the least discussed and covered story going on in our sports scene that needs more attention by our local media. Hint, hint. is the fact that it should be an amazing night. And at the end of it, if this is so crazy based on everything we just had the conversation about Dallas's place in all of this and kind of the vibe of the season, if Dallas was to win this game, they would be 1 point behind St. Louis, a team that I think all of us feel like have been having the most amazing season.
They were till a month ago, and then the rest came up.
Yeah, but it's just interesting how this all kind of shakes out as things go on.
It's fascinating that we're at a point where Dallas is like averaging like this 19,000 in attendance and is actually being limited by the size of the stadium. I can't believe we're even having that conversation.
I know.
Even last year you couldn't have that conversation. It's incredible. I mean, full credit to the organization for all that.
Yes, and it weirdly happened very quickly. It's not like it's been creeping up that way over the course of the last 5-6 years. It went from kind of half full stadium to nearly full stadium on a regular basis in a very short span of time, and
it's fantastic.
Yeah, it is great. And,
of course, Peter, I preferred post-COVID. 5 of us there with you and me and nobody. But that's me being selfish.
Yeah.
And that's no fun for everybody else. Just my personal preference was nobody there. But whatever.
For sure. Okay, so that game coming up this weekend, 7:30. The Hall of Fame stuff is all going on beforehand, and et cetera, et cetera. Go have a good time. All right, Buzz. You also did go out to training, and you've mentioned notes from training over the course of the last 30 minutes or so. Any other particular notes or comments about training you wanted to bring up?
I something I've been wanting to tell. It's not a story per se, but like you remember last year, for whatever reason, training on Wednesday was never open, and I was annoyed by that. It was always Monday and Wednesday, but Monday's a recovery day. It's terrible. Tuesdays, just not that good either. And Wednesday was always for me much better. And so this year, for whatever reason, like a month and a half ago, maybe. All of a sudden training was open on Wednesday, and it's been open on Wednesday every day since. And I know the answer isn't because Buzz asked for that. I know that's not what the answer is. So I asked Coach, and he said that like they've just decided that they like having the players have Monday off based on when they're playing. Of course, it changes, but they're playing on Saturday a lot and Sunday a lot. So they're giving Monday off, and it means that the Tuesday and Wednesday. And the other side of the coin is that's really awesome that I get to go to on Wednesday now, which is my preferred day. But also, I can't remember the last time I've seen somebody else at training. The last person I saw was John Arnold, and that was like a month and a half ago because he doesn't really cover FC Dallas full time anymore.
Mm-hmm.
He only does it every once in a while. So that feels like it's a combination of the availability of the coach on the Zoom calls. I just don't understand why anyone else that does this doesn't go to training because I don't think it's particularly fair.
Who else does this?
I mean, there's other podcasts around, I think, still, or websites that are covering this team still. I just think that, like, if you're going to come out and say, I think so-and-so should start or so-and-so shouldn't be starting or, like, they should do this. If you're not watching training, then you're just talking out your ass. It's like you need to be able to know, like, I know what I'm watching. I know what they're doing in training. That person is ready or is not ready to be able to play, Like, as much as I think so highly of Nolan Norris, for example, and there are times in training where he does things that clearly show his brain is at a whole other level. That doesn't mean I'm ready for him to start an Open Cup game on Wednesday, because I watch him train, I watch him play in practice, and that's not the same as playing for North Texas. He goes down to North Texas, he looks phenomenal. That's not the same as being ready to play for FC Dallas when you see him in training all the time. So, I just am constantly baffled that nobody else takes advantage of the fact that the sessions are open to media, that nobody goes. And maybe they go a different day every single week, and it's just total coincidence. But I find
I think it's a byproduct of a few things. I think it's one, the club's kind of running history with how they deal with the local media. Two, I think it's also the fact that media staffs are smaller and they don't have the same number of people available to go out and dedicate time to a specific club like this, But I will say this, if what is going on inside the stadium on game days continue, and it becomes more and more clear that there is a market and interest in a considerable interest in this club, I think that's the first thing that really needs to happen to force sports media outlets in this town to dedicate more resources to it. I think they get away with not doing it now because historically the perception is that the interest in this club, in this market specifically, is really, really tiny. And I think you and I both know that up until recently has been true. It's growing, and it's getting more considerable. But the first thing that needs to happen is they start to fill that stadium up on a regular basis. And that'll be the tipping point, I think, that causes media outlets to at least feel like they got to do something more.
Well, media is shrinking too. Papers are shrinking. Even radio and TV is shrinking. There's just not a lot of people that, and I know a lot of people have regular jobs and stuff. It's just, there's so much available when you're out there training. Because I go out there, I get to talk to coach for like 10 or 15 minutes by myself, rather than being on one question on a Zoom call.
But Buzz, I would argue, I bet if you were to go around every major league club and take an accounting of how many people attend MLS training sessions with any regularity, I think we would all be shocked to find out the number is very low.
Huh? You think so?
Oh, I think yes. And maybe I'm completely talking out of my ass here, but even in a very popular city like Portland, Seattle, Atlanta, I'm sure the numbers are greater than they are here in Dallas. But I don't think it's like there's a pile of people standing on the sidelines reporting on Atlanta United practice day in and day out.
Yeah, maybe you're right.
I've said this for Buzz. I've said this forever. I truly, truly believe that if you were doing what you do in another MLS market, like a Portland or a Seattle or an Atlanta, or even a Kansas City to that degree, I think you would. The profitability of what you do would be way off the charts versus what you're having to deal with in Dallas, because historically over the time that you've been doing this here, the team just hasn't been very popular in this town. The work that you do specifically is so unique and so special and frankly old school in many ways that I think that people, fans of other clubs would kill to have a Buzz Carrick and a third degree in those markets, and they just don't have it.
Yeah, I guess I go back to the days of guys going to NBA shoot-arounds and the baseball guys that be at batting practice, standing by the cage and chatting up the players, building those foundations. That's kind of how I look at it, But
yeah, look,
anyway.
You and I both know what you do isn't like life-changing money, right? Like it isn't. You can't make a living off of it, right?
No.
So not a lot of people can do or afforded a lifestyle, employment-wise, to do what you do, right?
That's
it's just
true.
You've finagled your life to be able to do this because it's a passion project for you, not a financial windfall.
Yeah.
And I think that's why, and that's part of the reason why you don't see a lot of this across the league, is because it's just really hard to make money to do this.
I guess that's my overall point, is that like most of the papers that used to send reporters to training, they don't anymore.
They don't, no.
Yeah, And nobody in radio would, of course, but even like it's been a while since I've seen a TV station. John Arnold used to be out there all the time when he was doing stuff for the Striker, and it was spilling over to the morning news, but that's gone away, so now he's not there. And we used to have Denise used to come out, once or every couple of weeks or so, but she's not with us anymore, of course. Rest in peace. But, it's just, it's funny that to me, it's funny that I was thinking about this today. I was talking to somebody about it, that like when I first started going to training, they literally want a grass field outside of a school. It wasn't even a soccer field. It was just a field of grass, no locker room, one coach and two assistants, no trainers, no media guys, no equipment guys, a couple of cones and some water. And now it's insane. The whole world is different in terms of soccer. There's a massive attention now and on MLS. We're seeing these franchises get valued in the top 20 in the world. And there's less media covering it than ever before because of the changing landscape of media. So it's just really ironic to me how, now there's 15 coaches at every session, if you include things like the 3 or 4 training guys and fitness guys and health guys and nutrition guys and video guys and drone guys. And, it's just ridiculous how many people are out there at any given session, compared to when we started, but no media. It's like just me.
Buzz, Listen to me. I mean this. From me to you, we've known each other for almost 30 years. At the beginning of this podcast, I do this throwaway bit where I say your hero, my hero, everybody's hero. And it's not really a throwaway. You are a hero, Buzz. And the reason why people love you and the work that you do is because you do this not for the money, you do it for the love of it, right? And what you churn out as a product that these people are willing to give you money for, I wish there was 100x that number of people, but it is unlike anything else I believe most any other MLS team gets. So it's 100% deserved, Buzz. You're doing the Lord's work when it comes to covering a Major League Soccer team.
Hey, speaking of which, patreon.com/third degree.
Yeah. Yes.
Sorry.
And if you pay Buzz money and you have friends that love this club, I would implore you to encourage them to do the same, because Buzz will always try his hardest to find a way to continue to do this as long as he can. I always worry that Buzz is going to get a better opportunity like he did that one period of time where he left town and moved to New Orleans, and we lost Buzz for several years, right?
Yeah.
And that was a very barren time. It also happened to coincide when the club was really shitty, but so it was kind of convenient. Yeah. But here we are at a time where the club is doing good things and playing better, and things are going really, really well. I would hate for you to find a really good opportunity in another town and be challenged with this idea of, well, I can't make enough money to justify not leaving. So again, not to put the onus on the good FC Dallas Curious fan, but seriously, if you're going to the games and you're going regularly and you're following this club, just throw a little something in Buzz's bucket. It's so easy to do. He totally and just so everybody understands, I get none of this. I do this because Buzz is my friend and I love talking about this club with Buzz. So he gets it. It's all his. Please continue to do that. There's my PBS charity drive.
Well, I didn't mean to turn it
rant.
into this whole rant, but I appreciate the love. I just was really struck today. Like in some ways, it felt like '98 all over again. When I first went to training, that there was nobody there for months at a time. I was the only one. I would go a month and a half before I would see somebody, and it was Keith Whitmore. The Morning Moose would send him out. He's a Big 12 writer. He didn't know anything about soccer.
Yeah, it's a weird time, man, and some of it, I think the long-term part of it is the fault of how the club has dealt with media relations in its long-term run, right? Especially after the Hunts took over.
Yeah,
I think some of it's just the media landscape and a lack of. I think today more than anything else, it's just that media outlets just don't have the capability of doing it the way that we all wish they could. So there you go.
Do you remember not to get sidetracked, but you remember the time you actually talked me out of shutting the whole thing down once? I don't know if you remember. It's right before we left the Warner News. We left, instead we went independent. That's basically was the decision. You talked me out of just, I just hit the mic, closing the whole thing down. But anyway, that's enough about that. One last thing from training. Shout out to Diego Hernandez, who's an academy player I've been hyping up for a couple of years. He was in first team training today, so that was nice. He's a good player. He's been playing for North Texas lately.
All right, moving on to something completely different. I was thrilled that you did this. I was hoping at some point you would do this because we've had these conversations about this weird oddity that Major League Soccer throws out there, which, on the heels of them getting rid of their the territory restrictions, was this idea that, Portland could come into the Dallas-Fort Worth area and recruit players for their academy from Solar or Texans or whatever.
Yeah, they can.
Yes, they can do that now, with the exception of the ability for each team to go within a radius of their marketplace and tag players that they get to claim as their own if these kids want to come play in Major League Soccer or related to that in any way, shape, or form. And there's a certain number of those. So, Buzz, you wrote an article this week kind of guesstimating who those 9 players are. And I thought that was fascinating reading.
Yeah, so the way the rule works is that you can even recruit people from someone else's academy, because you can only now tag 45 players inside your own academy. This is from the age of 15 and up. So there's other clubs can either come in and recruit players out of your actual team. They have to compensate you for that one if it's a non-tagged player, but a tagged player they can't take at all. And this idea that you could tag 9 players, it kind of is a rule that exists. I don't think FC Dallas asked for it, because the people at FC Dallas that I talked to, they actually want like no territory at all, because they think they would benefit from it. But because people would want to come here because of the pathway. But the rule exists for, just as an example, non-specifically, for guys like Blaine Ferry or Bailey Sparks that came out of Solar, that Dallas would want to say like, well, those are guys in our backyard. So it applies. You can use 9 guys not from your team. It only applies to when they sign for MLS. And they're only on it until as long as they're eligible for U19s. And then just like before, once that kid goes to college, he's sort of tapped for Dallas, and someone else can't sign him out of college because he's a Dallas guy, basically, if that makes any sense to you. So, to prevent guys from going to school for like 5 minutes and then going and signing, right? So like once they go into college, they remain your academy property, if that makes sense. So the list I put together is a mix of guys that I've personally seen and I know of that have been like in national team camps, or that a scout has told me is really, really good, and this guy needs to be doing something at a higher level or whatever, or it's going to be a riser. And there's a couple of guys that are actually already pros, which is, I thought, kind of fascinating, that like because of their pros in USL or in Europe. And I know for a fact teams are tagging players in Europe that have come out of their hometown. And the guy that I put on there that's in Europe is Maynor Figueroa's kid, Kirol, who plays for Liverpool, right? So what's to say is what's going to happen for him in the next 2 years at Liverpool? And if it doesn't work out there, and he's all of a sudden like, I need a gig, why FC Dallas? So it's a real fascinating.
We know
mix.
we will love you.
Yeah, I mean, he played here for only like 1 year, but why not tag him, right? And then, so I included Matthew Corcoran, who's at Birmingham Legion, and Knight Pickering, who's at Memphis 901, who are academy players that basically are doing a JOGO, but you tag them so that they can't sign for another team in MLS, and then the other one that's weird is Diego Pepe, because he never played for the academy. He went from ECNL, and this is an academy only rule. So he's gone from ECL right to North Texas. So what if somebody says, I want to sign Diego Pepe? Well, you better tag him. So I put him on there, and then it's just some guys from Solar and DKSC that I think are really talented or interesting or have been recommended to me. So it's the kind of thing that really fascinates me, of course.
Well, I encourage everybody to go check that out over at Buzz's website. It's a totally good read. Real quick, kit talk.
Oh,
we're now getting to see Dallas. I feel like we've seen Dallas wear this baby burn white kit more times this season than I ever really wanted to. The only exception to that is I really dig the little red trim on the shorts in particular. I don't know what it is about that. It's such a fantastic accent, and it does make me wish they would wear those white shorts with the previous powder blue away shirts.
Yeah.
Because I know they kept those powder blues theoretically as a third jersey, right?
That's what I was hearing, but that hasn't come to fruition. I wonder if we'll maybe see it in Leagues Cup or something.
Yeah, because they got to get rid of the MTX logo, so I wonder if they had to go finagle a load of them without a logo on it, so they could put the Southwestern or Children's Hospital.
I mean, some people I know that are really dialed in told me that was going to be the case, but I haven't seen that come to fruition. So maybe that ended up not happening. I was really surprised, actually, at all that they went away from the powder blue, because that was so successful. If it hadn't been for the supply chain problems, that jersey would have become the biggest selling jersey in club history. Not just a away jersey, which it already was. It would have been the biggest selling jersey, period, if they hadn't run out of them. Yeah. And they ran out like in 3 months, and it still was like one of the biggest sellers of all time.
Maybe we can get Dan to mock up, do a mock-up of the powder blue jersey with these cool white shorts that they have this season with the red trim. I think that would look kick-ass.
The funny thing is the white shorts with the white jersey, I think, look terrible. Because, I always look at them from macro, which is the top of the stands. It just looks like a dirty white kit. It looks terrible from the top, from TV, which is what I care about the most, right, from my eyeballs. The black shorts are so key. And if you did black shorts with red socks, now we're talking. That would be tight. But, that'd be good luck, man.
Still, phone is waiting. The phone lines are open. For you to call and get our opinion on such things, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, Buzz. Well, you and I solo job without the Dan one more time. Is he back next week?
He'll be back next week. We're going to attempt to record after the Open Cup game on Wednesday so we can have that result as well as the St. Louis result, and he'll be back. That.
You mean I have a late night Wednesday night ahead of me is what you're telling me?
Yeah, well, I'm sure I didn't look, but I think the game's probably at 7.
You know what? I have a concert to go to next Wednesday night. No. So maybe when I get back from the concert.
What time will that be? Goodness. We'll plan it later. We don't need to do that on the podcast.
I'm going to see Ben Folds at the Kessler. I'm so excited. And I think it'll probably be like an 8:30. So I bet I'm home after about 10:30 or so.
Man, I love Ben Folds. I should go with you.
Well, maybe my wife will give up the seat and you can go with me.
We'll record it after the Ben Folds show.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. All right.
We'll figure that out. Or maybe we'll record it Thursday.
We might have to record Thursday.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Anything else you want to talk about? I'm trying to look at my notes.
No, that's it. North Texas is quite interesting this year. That's not going super well. Their foreign signings look to be complete flameouts for the most part, so that's not good. But
how's the new coach working out? Any word?
I don't know, man. It's hard to tell.
At least nicer to his players?
Well, yeah. You mentioning their coach reminds me that I had something I wanted to talk about in terms of the FC Dallas big picture today, because it's a system that fits through the whole club that's important. So I'm gonna backtrack to FC Dallas. Hopefully we didn't lose the whole audience. I've talked about this before. I call it the Nico W. And this is about the defensive stability that he finds so important. And most of the fans might remember that Oscar Pareja and Lucci both liked modern attacking outside backs. Oscar believed in one at a time going, one up and one back. Lucci was both can go, whatever. This coach likes defensive outside backs. So when they're in possession, those outside backs step forward and it makes a W. Outside back to center back to 6 to center back to other outside back. It's a W, right? So most fans, I think, can recognize that in possession. They're hyper conscious of that shape and that defensive base. He does not want the outside backs to overload out of that shape super aggressively. Now, from time to time, they'll inch up the sideline or they'll overload. But when that happens, something to look for is the 8 on that side will check back and take up that outside back's position to maintain the W. So this is something fans in the stands can look for that defensive rigidity and stability that I'm talking about. Even when they're in possession, they want that shape in place. So look for that 8 checking out. And it happens both, Paxton and Leggett both do it. Paxton more than Leggett does. It happens with the first team, and they do it at North Texas. I've watched both of their 8s do the same kick out to where the outback has vacated that space. And that's when I knew that it was an ingrained organizational philosophy coming down from the first team coach. So when you ask about the North Texas coach, that's the big change, is they're now playing the same way the first team is, whereas last year they weren't. There's actually the players are being used in the same way. They're playing the same roles. They're doing the same functions in the build. The style is attempted to be the same. Now they're having some problems because the talent's not there, but it's nice to see the coach dialed in with the first team, which is really important.
Good information, Buzz.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I dig that. Okay. Well, I think that's going to do it for another episode. Do you?
Yeah, I think it's pretty good. Thomas Roberts made his Columbus debut. Did we cover that last week?
I think we did last week, yes.
Yeah, okay, good.
I think we
did. I want to make sure I got that. It's near to my heart. I want to make sure he gets the love. Hey, when he's playing for the Crew by the end of the season, I'm going to point it out.
And Tanner Tessmann had another nice performance for Venezia, who are now solidly not going to get relegated, and they're actually, I think they're even closer now to a playoff spot, which would be ridiculous.
By the way, my back burner idea for where you get a world-class 6 is to buy Tanner Tessmann back for $4 million and make him a 6.
Wouldn't that be awesome to have Tanner Tessmann? You think Tanner wants to come back to Frisco after living the life he's living in Venice?
No, but if you pay him enough, he might.
Maybe, I suppose. Yeah.
I mean, his passing out of that spot with his defensive ability and his size, his intimidation factor, it'd be like Matt McEwen, except way better. That's a deep cut for you, by the way, Matt McEwen.
Boy, that is that is a deep MLS version 1.0 cut if there ever was one.
Yeah. Third Degree, the podcast, has been brought to you by soccer90.com. Make sure and shop all their stuff over there. FC Dallas, North Texas Soccer Club, U.S. National Team gear. They got everything, jerseys, tees, scarves. Got that One Planet jersey, one of the best ones they've had in years. Use code Third Degree at checkout, 20% off, 3RDDEGREE, 20% off, soccer90.com. Some exclusions apply.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Buzz. Good time. Good chatting.
Yeah, thanks, Peter, for hosting. Appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, FC Dallas Curious fan. We will speak to you sometime, probably on Thursday next week after both St. Louis and the Open Cup game against Nashville next week on another episode of Third Degree, the podcast.
Ahsoka Tano.
Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast.